Why focusing on tinnitus can make it feel stronger. Now, this is an educational discussion based on lived experiences, my own, and reputable sources, not medical advice. Why focusing on tinnitus can make it feel stronger. Focusing on tinnitus can change how it feels. Many people notice that the more they pay attention to the sound, the more present it seems. It can feel louder, sharper, or harder to ignore. This can be confusing, especially when nothing external has changed. But this experience is not unusual. It reflects a normal feature of how the brain processes attention and sensory information. The brain is constantly filtering signals. At any given moment, there is far more sensory input available than we are consciously aware of. Sounds, physical sensations, visual details, all of these are being processed in the background. Attention determines what moves into the foreground. When attention is directed toward a signal, the brain increases its processing of that signal. It becomes clearer, more detailed, and more noticeable. When attention moves away, the same signal often fades into the background. Tinnitus follows this same pattern. When you begin to monitor the sound, checking it, listening for it, comparing it, the brain treats it as something that requires attention. This does not happen because of a conscious decision alone. It is part of an automatic system designed to prioritise information that may be important. The more frequently a signal is checked, the more the brain learns that it should keep that signal active within awareness. This can create a loop. The sound is noticed, attention moves towards it. The perception becomes stronger, which leads to more noticing. Over time, this loop can make tinnitus feel more persistent than the underlying signal actually is. It is important to understand that this does not mean attention is causing tinnitus. The signal itself originates from activity within the auditory system. What attention influences is how strongly that signal is experienced. This distinction is subtle but important. The brain is not creating tinnitus simply by focusing on it. Instead, it is increasing the priority given to an existing signal. This is sometimes the brain does with many types of sensory input. For example, if you focus on a quiet background noise, it can suddenly seem much clearer. If you concentrate on a physical sensation, such as the feeling of your hands, that sensation becomes more vivid. The same principle applies here. Another aspect of attention is that it closely is linked to monitoring behaviour. When a sound feels unfamiliar or uncertain, the brain may begin to check it repeatedly. Is it still there? Has it changed? Is it louder than before? Each of these checks reinforces the idea that the signal is important. And as long as the brain categorises the signal as important, it will continue to allocate attention to it. This can make the experience feel more constant. There is also a connection between attention and expectation. If you expect to hear tinnitus, the brain becomes more sensitive to detecting it. This is not a conscious effort, rather a predictive process. The brain is constantly anticipating what it might encounter and preparing to process it. When expectation is combined with monitoring, the signal can become even more prominent. However, this process can also work in the opposite direction. When attention is directed outward towards conversation, activity, or external sound, the brain naturally shifts its focus. In those moments, tinnitus often becomes less noticeable. Not because it has disappeared, but because it is no longer being prioritised. Over time, many people find that as they reduce the amount of monitoring and checking, the brain gradually begins to treat tinnitus as a background signal. The shift does not require forcing attention away. In fact, trying to block or suppress the sound can sometimes increase focus on it. Instead, the change often happens more naturally as attention becomes engaged with other things. There is also a nuance worth understanding. Attention is not entirely under conscious control. It is influenced by factors such as mood, fatigue, and the overall state of the nervous system. On days when attention is more internally focused, tinnitus may feel stronger. On days when attention is naturally directed outward, it may feel less present. This variation is part of the same system. It reflects how the brain allocates its resources at different times. The key point is that attention changes perception. It does not change the underlying signal in a direct way, but it can significantly alter how that signal is experienced. Understanding this can help shift the way tinnitus is interpreted. Instead of seeing increased awareness as a sign that something is worsening, it can be understood as a temporary shift in attention. And when attention moves elsewhere, the perception often changes again. Over time, as the brain becomes more familiar with the signal and less inclined to monitor it, the loop gradually weakens. The sound may still be present, but it is no longer placed at the centre of awareness. And when something is no longer central, it becomes much easier for the brain to leave it in the background. Thanks for listening to this episode from the David Health Channel.